My name is Katie Glass, and while I do claim Louisiana as home now, I grew up as a military brat. So I got to experience a lot of different people and cultures growing up, which really drove me into um, this idea of itinerancy and being a pastor and getting to go to many different corners of Louisiana and the world and wherever God sends me to get to meet all the different kind of people that God has created. I think my call story is probably similar to a lot of people's, that I heard the call of God when I was between my junior and senior year of high school. I was driving by a funeral home and I saw a pastor out there in the robe. And I kind of, the thought came into my head about, what about ministry? And my response was, absolutely not. I will do anything else, God. The last thing I ever want to do is work for the church. Um, and I swore up and down that that would never happen, that I would be happy holding down the back pew of whatever church I attended. And that would be the extent of my involvement with the church. And then more and more things seemed to happen. People would mention, well, Katie, have you ever thought about ministry? You're so good with kids. You're so good with youth. Have you ever thought about it? And that just kept being brought up in my life. And my parents would bring it up, and my pastors would bring it up, and I kind of decided, okay, I'll negotiate with God, and I will go and do children and youth, and that way I'm involved in church, but I'm not like the one in charge. I don't have to publicly speak. That was my biggest fear. I used to cry every time I had to speak in front of people. And so I made that negotiation, hoping that God would accept it. Flash forward, obviously, that was not the case. But I went through my undergraduate years still thinking that working in the church in a smaller capacity was where God was going to allow me to stay, even though I knew God was calling me for more. And finally, as I approached graduation from my undergrad, I got really tired of my family and my friends and my pastor saying, well, you should just go visit seminary. I really think you're called to ministry. You should try it. And so, in a way to kind of get them off my back and to convince them that, of course, I'm not meant to be a pastor, I scheduled a visit to go see Perkins School of Theology. And the whole way from my hotel to the school on visit day, I practiced how I was going to tell my friends and family that seminary was not for me. Before I even got there, I was concocting this story about how I tried it. I really, really wanted it, but it just wasn't for me. God is not calling me here. And I sat in an Old Testament class with Roy Heller, which was just a mind-blowing class. And I thought, well, maybe not a pastor, but seminary education wouldn't be too bad just to get to learn all these Bible facts. I tell people I'm a Bible nerd through and through. And so I was so excited that, well, maybe not pastoral ministry, but perhaps I could learn a couple things in these classes. And then through a couple conversations at the visit, I learned how much of seminary was writing. And that was not my strong suit. I am a numbers person through and through. That's why I love audit. When most pastors do not, it's because I love to do numbers. That makes sense in my brain, where writing papers and sermons and stuff before seminary did not sound like a whole lot of fun. And so I just determined, I can take more studies like on my personal time if I want to know some more Bible facts, but seminary was not for me. And then we went to chapel at Perkins, and by the grace of God and probably a little bit of terror in my heart, it happened to be Louisiana Conference's day to lead chapel. And so all the students from the Louisiana Conference were there helping, and our bishop was there. And so as soon as I saw the bishop walk in, I made every effort to slink down in my chair. And I'm not a very big individual. You'll see that I'm quite short. And so I thought I was hidden pretty well. And then the person I was sitting beside knew the bishop and flagged her down and waved her over. And the bishop asked me, oh, so you're coming to my seminary. You're coming to where I went, what do you think? You think you're going to sign up and come? And this was before I realized you probably should edit what you say to your bishop, because I said, absolutely not. I am not smart enough to write all these papers. I do not want to do 3 more years of school. The most miserable thing I can think of is going to seminary and becoming a pastor. Absolutely not. And so she asked me, well, why are you here? It's a reasonable question. And I said, well, because I wanted to get my parents and my pastors off my back about this ministry thing and prove to them that I can't do it. I'm not smart enough. I can't write papers. I don't like public speaking. This is miserable for me. This is definitely not where God is calling me. Even though in the back of my head, I knew it was exactly where God was calling me. And so the bishop kind of looked at me and I looked up at her and she said, well, your parents think you can do it? And I said, yeah, they have been wondering for years if I was called to ministry. And she said, oh, and your pastors think you can do it? I said, oh, yeah, they tell me all the time. Oh, yeah, you preached a great sermon here, or you're great in children's moment. You can do this. And she said, well, they know you well. And if they believe you can do it, then I believe you can do it. And it was like a switch flipped in my head. And I was like, well, if the bishop thinks I can do it, well, she's smarter than anybody else. So she must be right. She's a bishop. So God must say some things to her that don't quite make it down to my level yet. And so I decided, okay, I'll try this seminary thing. And I gave myself 1 semester at a time and just tried to convince myself to be done. And I got to the end of 2 years and all I had left was my internship. And I thought, well, I've put in this much time. I might as well finish it out. And in that last year, I got to intern full time in a church. And I fell madly, madly in love with the background of church, being the one who makes worship happen, who gets to go and sit at the bedside of people who are entering this next phase of forever presence of God. And I could not imagine doing anything else. And even in the most difficult moments where, church is church, but church is business, and we have to worry about that, or walking with people through the tragic death of children, I was still pulled to go to church every day. I was excited to pull in to my parking spot and go in and teach Bible studies and write all these different things. And I was so excited for it that the fear, while still present of, can I do this? God, are you sure you want me to lead your people? Began to shift to, I'm going to do this. I'm going to lead your people. Will I be perfect at it? Probably not. And now, 3 years later, absolutely not perfect. But will I strive every day to do the best I can? Absolutely. And so I look back now at 28, looking at 18-year-old me who decided to go into Christian education and work for the church. And if she could see me now, I think she would probably have a heart attack to think that we actually did it. We no longer cry because we have to publicly speak 3 times every week. Like so much has shifted to make becoming a pastor a reality, that the things that I thought I would never do and never be smart enough to do, God proved me wrong time and time again. After every paper I wrote that I realized it wasn't so hard, and every test I took that I realized, wow, these things are really kind of fun when you're a Bible nerd. That I got to the point where through commissioning and through residency, I don't see anything else that I could do, even in the midst of announced denominational separation and a global pandemic. Even in those difficult moments, I still think, but I want to serve the church. When I was serving at First Alexandria, which was my internship church, but also my first appointment as associate, I would go and visit with Ashley a lot in my internship year. And then when I became the associate pastor, I can remember I got a call from a congregant who said, hey, my friend is in the hospital. She doesn't have a church. Can you please go visit her? She just needs some prayer and maybe some communion. And so here I was, a baby pastor, just commissioned, going for my first stranger solo hospital visit. And I was so ready. I was excited. And I get to the hospital and I ask, hey, what room is this person in? Oh, they're in this room. So I march in there with all of my energy, introduce myself. Hi, I'm Pastor Katie. I'm from First Alexandria. Your friend so and so sent me here. I just want to pray with you and share communion with you if you wanted, and just love on you for a few moments. And I began to realize that she had a trait. And so I couldn't really communicate with her. And so I was like, okay, I'll talk to a wall. So a one-sided conversation works for me. And so I talked to her, I read her a couple of scriptures, and just really, she could nod her head, ask a lot of yes or no questions. And so I began to pray with her. And as I was praying, it struck me that the reason she looked at me with big eyes and like I had come out of nowhere is because she was not the right person. She was not the person I was supposed to go visit in the hospital that day. Um, and as I began to realize that, and while I'm praying and glancing around the room, I realized that I'm pretty sure this elderly lady is actually an elderly gentleman. And so I have never switched from she and her to they and them so quickly in my life. Um, and I can remember walking out of there going, oh my gosh, Katie, this is your first solo hospital visit for a stranger, and you don't even know who that was. You probably called them the wrong gender. You definitely called them the wrong name, and they couldn't communicate. They must think you're crazy. And I was sharing this story with my senior pastor at the time, and she said, well, was it the wrong person? Yes, but did that person still need you that day? Probably. And so I still giggle about about that, and I still think of that person every day, and I just wonder what they think about this little old girl coming in there full of energy, rattling off things that made no sense. Um, but I do hope and pray that the joy of the Lord was present in that moment, at least, and that the prayers covered that person. And I never did hear from them. I left my card because I figured the family member may call when they hear that this strange lady came into the room. And I never did hear, but I trust that God is still working within that family for sure. And so that was one of those moments where I was like, oh, can I do this? Can I be a pastor? Are you allowed to be a pastor if you go and pray with the wrong person at a hospital visit? But it turns out you can. They don't kick you out for that, so no worries. But that was a story that I will never forget. And then also at First Alexandria, being the associate and also being the younger pastor there. My senior pastor wasn't so much older than me, but I was the younger pastor. I had no problem like embarrassing myself and having fun in church, and really making church a place of joy and not this place where you have to sit really still and you can't make any noise. And I wanted to make church approachable for anybody who walked in the doors. And so we were planning a fall festival with our preschool, and I was trying to think of a way to advertise it that would really stick in the minds of the church people so that they would be a part of it. And I thought, what a better way to catch somebody's attention than one of those inflatable mans who does this thing like at a car wash. And I actually found a costume that would inflate, and I could do this with my arms. And so we make it through the whole church service, and my senior pastor is up there doing announcements, and I slip out the back, slip out of my robe, put on my little inflatable man costume, go to the back of the church. And as she goes, oh, I think we have one more announcement, me and all of my excitement and inflatableness ran down the aisles of First Methodist Alexandria doing this number, inviting people to join us at the fall festival. And I was told that nothing ever like that had happened in that church. But we had a lot of people turn up for it and who were excited to see the enjoyment in the kids' face, who got to see Pastor Katie as an inflatable man, and who really wanted to be involved in the joy that that event was for our preschool. And so I never thought in seminary that one day I would run down the aisle of a very traditional sanctuary as an inflatable man. But it is something that I will treasure forever and truly believe was a highlight in ministry. I think some of the people I am most thankful for are the churches that I have gotten to serve so far. I've served First Alexandria as their associate, and then I have served First Eunice, and Louisiana Memorial Opelousas as their solo pastor. And the people who have allowed me to try new things, to experiment, to learn how to do this thing called being a pastor as a new pastor, and my first audit by myself, and first funerals for strangers, and going through all of that and loving me through it and offering encouragement in the moments where I was still like, are you sure, God, that you want me to do this? And so having them as a support who loved me so well in the times that I've got to be with them. I'm so grateful for them, as well as Ashley McGuire, who was my senior pastor at First Alexandria. When I showed up there as an intern, I was scared of my own voice. I didn't think I would ever know how to put into practice the things I had learned in seminary. Um, and the thought of ever having to run a church by myself was terrifying. And then through the 3 years I got to spend with her, she challenged me by never giving me the answers to any of my questions, but saying, well, what do you think? And making me think through the things that I was trying to establish, of encouraging me to succeed, but also to fail and learn in failure and know that failure is not the end of a story, but it's just the new beginning that we start at. And so I will forever be grateful for her as a senior pastor, as a mentor, but also as a great friend that I got to have in the beginning years of my ministry. I'm also so thankful for Joanne Cooper. She has been a mentor of mine since she was my pastor many, many years ago. She helped me get into this candidacy process and get through it in about 6 months, right as she first became the pastor at Pineville. And getting to know her while she ran this journey alongside me, not knowing me, but truly choosing to make her time and make her advice available to me, is something I will forever be grateful for. And I don't think I would be sitting in this chair or leading the churches or continuing on in ministry or even getting ordained if it hadn't been for the Joanne Cooper in my life, who has always cheered me on and helped push me forward. And then, of course, none of this would have been possible without my family. I have an incredible mom and dad who knew I should have been a pastor long before I realized it in myself, and never allowed me to lean into my fears enough to close out the abilities that they saw within me, and who have always been my biggest supporters, from editing papers to hearing sermon examples to tell me if it works or not, to offering to help me move, to come and be a part of my life wherever I am and support me wherever God sends me. I also have an incredible sister and a future sister-in-law who have been incredibly supportive in my life, especially in this call to ministry. They are always cheering me on. They are always showing up when I need them, and making sure that I know that they love me and that they support me, and that is something that just means the world to me. And then I would be remiss if I didn't thank my residency group, my Room 3 group. I don't know what it was, but from the second we connected at commissioning, we just clicked, and it has been like a family ever since. And it is only possible that I got here because of them, because of their encouragement, because of their advice. Because in the moments where we are writing ordination questions in the middle of a pandemic and we just need some support, these people were the ones who had my back, who held my hand in the difficult moments, and who have continued to push me forward. And so I'm so, so grateful for my residency group, and know that while we were kind of forced together now, it was truly the biggest blessing in ministry that I could have experienced this early on. And it is a group that I'm going to hold on to forever. And then there are so many others, and I'm sure I'm missing so many people. And those who have impacted my life, I thank you so much. But I think the person that I want to thank the most is somebody who unfortunately is no longer able to be here, and that is my Paul, Bob Nash. He was the one who, from the time I was born, would pray by my bedside when I would visit, who would take me to church, who would sing and teach me all of the Christian kids' songs, who just encouraged me every step of the way to love God, to love ministry, to love my churches. I'm very grateful that he got to see me be commissioned. And I know that if he were still here, he would be front row and center at that ordination, cheering me on and really taking as many pictures as I would allow him to take, because he has always been my biggest cheerleader and my best friend. And while I wish he were here, and I will miss him dearly on ordination day, I do know that he will probably have the best seat in heaven, looking down, cheering me on, and telling everybody around him, "That's my granddaughter. That's her. She's mine." Because I know that his support for me has never wavered, and nor do I think it ever will.